In the early 90s, the box office success of Wayne's World set a trend where Saturday Night Live sketches were being turned into major motion pictures on a constant basis. But in between the release of Wayne's World 2 and the box office smash It's Pat, that was sarcasm,
Here comes the mail!
came a movie called Airheads. While this definitely isn't and absolutely shouldn't be considered an SNL movie, Airheads featured 3 active Saturday Night Live cast members in starring roles. And despite the fact that SNL was experiencing its highest ratings in over a decade just as this movie was set to release, Airheads bombed so hard that it was pulled from theaters after just 2 weeks. In today's episode, we'll be looking back on this box office dud turned cable TV cult classic.
20th Century Fox invites you,
Even though you're a goon.
to live it up. So grab a ticket,
I know the procedure.
cancel your plans, and join the party.
I don't want anything. I just don't want to go outside.
Airheads, rated PG-13. Sneak preview Saturday, July 30th. Opens August 5th everywhere.
Airheads revolves around a struggling rock band called the Lone Rangers.
How can you pluralize the Lone Ranger?
What's wrong with that?
The band breaks into a local hard rock radio station in an attempt to have their demo tape played on the air, in hopes that doing so will fast-track their journey to success. But when things don't go as planned, the band takes the station's employees hostage using convincingly real-looking toy guns, turning an innocent stunt fueled by aspirations of fame into a criminal act that received attention on a nationwide scale.
We spent a lot of money on this thing, and it's gonna get some airplay. My man's gonna gank you right here and now.
Shit, yeah.
Airheads has always drawn comparisons to the Al Pacino movie Dog Day Afternoon.
Attica! Attica! Attica!
Rodney King? What's that supposed to mean?
He's that guy.
Writer Rich Wilkes has openly admitted that he took pieces of the film's setup, added a comedic element to it, and essentially just swapped out bank robbers with a scrappy hard rock band, hoping to break into the music industry.
Oh yeah, and we want a record contract, so let's get some kind of record executive down here pronto.
Island Pictures, the now defunct film studio run by Island Music throughout the 1990s, initially agreed to finance the movie. But on paper, Airheads had big ambitions.
Naked pictures of B. Arthur. The chick from the Golden Girls.
Come on, fellas, I'm just a street cop, all right? I mean, how am I supposed to find all this stuff?
And the studio hadn't quite made a name for themselves in the world of film yet. This was a pre-Basketball Diaries Island Pictures, a pre-Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood Island Pictures.
Message!
And most importantly, a pre-BAPS Island Pictures. Therefore, Fox was brought in to cough up the funds needed to produce the film as it was written. When thinking about film studios that exude a rebellious rock and roll vibe, 20th Century Fox is not at the top of that list.
This is hot. You guys are the hottest thing since Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
Marky Mark, man, that guy sucks.
When they stepped in to produce Airheads, 20th Century Fox studio head Joe Roth had recently been fired and replaced by Peter Chernin, whose first priority was backing films with broad appeal, rather than unique, creative projects that cater to a smaller audience. A good example being the movie Freaked, a bizarre but awesome movie co-directed by Alex Winter of Bill and Ted fame.
Be excellent to each other.
Peter Chernin was appointed as studio head during its production, and because he simply didn't like the film, he cut its budget, gave it a new title, and limited its presence in movie theaters, causing it to flop miserably. But luckily, Peter loved the Airheads script, and Fox was in desperate need of a comedy, so the film was immediately greenlit. Shortly after that, director Michael Lehman, who was no stranger to box office flops turned cult classics, signed on to direct the movie. When casting began, he thought to himself, I'm going to get people in this movie that you wouldn't expect in a movie like this, and that's going to make it more like something I want to see. That line of thinking makes a lot of sense when you look at the actors cast in Airheads, and even more so the actors who auditioned but ultimately got passed over. For example, John Cusack was originally the first choice for Chaz. And I'm a big fan of his work, but I just can't picture that at all. When it comes to music-related movies, he's best at playing the sad bastard record store owner, not the frontman of a hard rock band. Pauly Shore tried to weasel, pun intended, his way into the movie for the role of Carter, which ended up being played by David Arquette.
You guys are crazy, man. Y'all are all woohoo and shit.
As for the actors who actually ended up in the movie, Brendan Fraser was one of the first to sign on.
I'm out there in the clubs and on the streets, and I'm living it. I am rock and roll.
He really didn't have much star power, but definitely caught some attention with a recent dramatic performance in the movie School Ties. More importantly, he showed his comedic chops in a wacky little 1992 movie called Encino Man.
I'll be back.
As for Chaz's fellow Lone Rangers, part-time drummer, part-time pool cleaner, and full-time crop top wearer Pip would be played by Adam Sandler.
We're down, man. Hendrix was God.
Yeah, I seen Anthrax and Public Enemy. That was out of control, man. You catch that one, Jake?
Much like Brendan, Adam's film resume was extremely small when casting began on Airheads, to the point that Fox was hesitant about even casting him in the movie, because aside from some television experience on SNL, he only had a small role in Shakes the Clown and a starring role in 1989's Going Overboard under his belt. If you've never heard of that one, it's because Adam has been extremely open about his embarrassment of this movie and would prefer that it be wiped from his resume completely.
Like, when I was a kid, I used to steal Alka-Seltzer all the time, and I'd feed the seagulls, and they'd blow up.
The third and final Lone Ranger was Pip's brother, Rex the bass player, portrayed by Steve Buscemi.
Why don't you ever play these guys?
Listen, if they're so hot, how come they're not tearing up the charts, babe?
Because you never play them, babe.
Of the three lead actors, Steve had proven himself most as a big screen performer. He had already done Reservoir Dogs, King of New York, Barton Fink, and so much more. But Fox still wasn't sure if he could handle a mainstream comedy. They initially pushed back on the casting choice, but trusted director Michael Lehmann's instincts and allowed him to be cast in the movie. And thank God, because this was his first collaboration with Sandler that ultimately kicked off a long friendship and working relationship. And I don't even want to imagine a world without his characters from Mr. Deeds, Billy Madison, or Big Daddy. Sausage McMuffin. Because of Airheads, all of these actors were placed into major roles before Hollywood really recognized that they were talented enough to do so. This is a unique movie in that some of the supporting cast members were, at that time at least, way more recognizable than the guys in the poster. In the opening scene at Palatine Records, Judd Nelson plays Jimmy Wing, the snobby record executive with a horrid-looking soul patch who repeatedly rejects the Lone Ranger's demo tape.
It's not just the music, it's the way you talk about it. You have such passion.
Later on, when the band breaks into Rebel Radio, they meet a seasoned DJ named Ian the Shark.
Listen up, guppies. Ian the Shark is back, and have I got a surprise for you.
This character was played by Joe Mantegna, who you might recognize from his nearly 300 episodes of Criminal Minds. Apparently similar to Buscemi, Fox believed that he was too dramatic an actor for the role and didn't really want him in the movie. But after Joe pointed out that he had previously appeared in a print ad for a guitar amplifier in his younger days, Michael Lehmann couldn't help but convince Fox to have him in the movie.
The Lone Rangers!
Michael McKean plays the station manager, who I swear inspired the look of Laszlo in Grand Theft Auto 5. Seinfeld's Michael Richards plays a nerdy accountant who crawls around in the vents of the radio station like Bruce Willis in Die Hard, which makes sense because both movies were filmed in the exact same building.
Cockroach!
And after the band takes over the radio station, Ernie Hudson shows up as the responding sergeant, continuing his typecasting streak as a stern but fair police officer. He previously played similar characters in The Crow, the good one, not that new SoundCloud rapper bullshit. And a movie that I never thought I'd mention in an episode, let alone 2 episodes in a row, The Cowboy Way. When the band's demo reel gets destroyed by faulty equipment, Sergeant O'Malley sends an exuberant rookie cop out to find another copy. That officer was played by the one and only Chris Farley.
I know the procedure.
He only had a few lines of dialogue in the entire film, but it doesn't even matter because his mannerisms and facial expressions were so f***ing funny.
Wilson, get over here.
Airheads is a movie that truly divides its audience right down the middle. As someone who absolutely loves this film, I can also understand why some people are turned off by it. Although I think we can all agree that the moment where Brendan Fraser sprays hot sauce on a burrito with a sad expression on his face, while unsatisfied by the replacements plays, and the camera pulls away from him, is one of the greatest moments in cinema history. But everywhere you look, Airheads is labeled as comedy, plain and simple. The thing is, this is not a multiple laughs per minute, too many jokes to handle type of movie. Like, don't be fooled by Adam Sandler's inclusion. You're not gonna hear him do his signature gibberish nonsense once in this movie. Most of the humor is pretty dry or references rock and roll jargon that might fly over some people's heads completely.
Is your musical vibe?
We ain't thrash,
We could play anything.
And if the humor doesn't do it for you, you kind of have to be invested in the hostage angle. But a big complaint from detractors of this movie is that the pacing leading up to the radio station takeover is too quick, making it harder to sympathize for the band and their struggles. Another criticism is that for a movie about a hard rock band, Airheads never quite pushed the limits with its comedy or themes. The director has stated that he always envisioned this as an R-rated comedy and kept pushing for that, but Fox and their new studio head wanted it to be easily digestible to the masses. And that line of thinking definitely carried over into the marketing for this movie, because just watch.
Brendan Fraser, Steve Buscemi, Adam Sandler.
He doesn't wear a helmet, does he?
Airheads.
No idea what you're saying right now.
Directed by Michael Lehman. Rated PG-13.
Luckily, Fox realized that the target audience of this movie, metalheads and hard rockers, probably weren't going to respond well to Gioacchino Rossini. So in later trailers, they swapped that out with songs by Motorhead and 4 non-blondes from the movie soundtrack. Unfortunately, that effort was too little too late, because as I stated in the episode's intro, this movie just bombed so ridiculously hard when it landed in theaters. Airheads opened up alongside Clear and Present Danger and The Little Rascals, which took the number 1 and number 4 spots respectively. Airheads, on the other hand, opened up at spot number 10 for the weekend. Seeing as Beavis and Butthead had a quick vocal cameo in the movie,
"You guys are like the Lone Rangers, right? You suck."
It should come as no surprise that Fox turned to MTV to help promote this movie. The Tuesday after its release, MTV aired Headbangers Ball, the Airheads edition.
We're going to have a party for the movie Airheads. You're going to meet cast members and White Zombie's going to play.
The episode featured interviews with some of the cast, including Adam Sandler and Chris Farley, and an appearance by White Zombie, who performed Feed the Gods from the film's soundtrack. As cool of a time capsule this special is to look back on now, if it did help Airheads at the box office, it didn't help much. The movie ended up being pulled from theaters after its second weekend, where it was crushed by a new addition to the box office, In the Army Now, starring Pauly Shore, which ironically enough, Brendan Fraser cameoed in as his character from Encino Man. As someone who always just loved this movie for what it was and never looked into the financial side of things until making this video, I honestly never knew it flopped so bad in theaters. I'm not really surprised though, because Hollywood never seems to learn their lesson when it comes to movies about fictional rock bands. But most of these box office bombs have one thing in common. They built up a cult following after being released to home video, or in the case of Airheads, cable TV.
Turn on FX Major Movie Sunday. Rock and roll! Brendan Fraser and Adam Sandler star in Airheads, Sunday at 8/7 Central on FX.
Airheads was released on VHS tape and aired on premium stations like HBO starting in 1995. But the film really began to find an audience when it started airing on stations like FX and Comedy Central. I definitely remember seeing bits and pieces of the movie on TV in those days, but admittedly, I didn't watch it from start to finish until 2008 with the launch of the Netflix app on Xbox 360. Do you remember Party Mode where you could watch movies with your buddies over Xbox Live? Damn, that was so awesome. But you know what isn't awesome? It's ridiculously hard to find Airheads in 2024. Although the movie was briefly streaming on Hulu earlier this year, it's since been wiped from existence on all streaming apps in the US, Canada, and the UK. I've got a DVD copy at the ready, so I don't really care, but even the Blu-ray version has been out of print for years and sells for hundreds of dollars online. Disney, do the fans a service and put this movie out on 4K. If you released an overpriced special collector's set with a replica Pip beanie, I would buy that shit on day one. Brendan Fraser and Adam Sandler have sat down for some interviews together in recent years, and their faces always light up as soon as they start talking about their experiences on this movie.
And man, was that the best party of all time.
And if not for Airheads, Adam Sandler would have never met writer Rich Wilkes, who he then brought on to write additional scenes for Billy Madison, including one of the most quotable lines of dialogue in the entire film.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Before I wrap this episode up, I just wanted to quickly mention that I'm finally launching memberships for my channel. I truly appreciate everyone who stops by and watches my bullshit content, but if you want to give me a little bit of extra support, you can join the Pastimers Club for $2.99 a month, where you'll get early access to new videos, exclusive badges next to your name, and some pretty sweet custom emojis. If you're not interested, feel free to at least subscribe to the channel. If you want, leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts on Airheads, or if this video inspired you to give it a watch. I definitely recommend it. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.